Well, what's up again there, guys? Ryan the Three Topics Gamer here to bring you the return of my top lists series. As today we have a very exciting topic, as a viewer of mine going by the name of Revelation Turtle, you know who you are, requested that I share with you my top 5 favorite Mario games of all time. Now, before I get into my list, I have a little bit of backstory, or should I say just a little, warning to give to some of you out there. Now, you guys know me. I am a hardcore, almost fanatical PlayStation fanboy and proud of it to date. However, I would never even think about renouncing my history with Nintendo. I started out with Nintendo. Trust me, I love Nintendo long before the PlayStation came into my life, and would always, and still do, cherish my memories of playing it. Especially with the NES, Super NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and the lovely Nintendo 64, which I still think is my all-time favorite Nintendo console of all time. However, like modern Disney, there seemed to come a time where I don't know whether the people behind it changed, their philosophy changed, or whatever happened. But I just don't think Nintendo for today is just for me. I don't know whether I'm too old, or maybe I'm just not welcome in the Nintendo community. But it has been almost well over 20 years since I have played a good Mario game. And the last time I played a Mario game was actually on the Wii, and I didn't like it. Believe it or not, the only reason I even picked up a Nintendo Wii was not to play a Mario game, but it was actually to play this game. Only for me to discover to my shock that when I actually bought my Nintendo Wii to play this game would actually be released on the PlayStation 3 6 months later. So I immediately gave up my Nintendo Wii and gave it just some kid that was living in my neighborhood, and I just never gave the Nintendo Wii another chance. Or the Wii U, or whatever the hell the Switch is. Mario games nowadays are just not for me. They're not fun anymore. However, before Mario and Nintendo went completely downhill, it had a long history of great and fun Mario games. And I would like to share my top 5 favorite with you today. So, just to give you a heads up, basically these games are from like 1996 and back. So anything after that will not be on this list, just to guys give you a warning. So, with that little disclaimer out of the way, I would like to start off my list with sharing with you my number 5 favorite Mario game of all time. And that just so happens to be... Number 5 on my list has to go to Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. Now, this is actually a game that I didn't get to play till I was much older, and it's probably not something that I would have liked when it originally came out in 1996. But since my favorite genre of games since then has become RPGs, and I do openly regard Mario as the greatest video game character of all time, then mixing the two really should have worked out perfectly. But unfortunately, that wasn't quite the case. While I do think that it is a solid game overall, I'm still not sure if the Mario franchise really works as an RPG. Game mechanic wise, it is a very basic game, and it certainly is something that a fan of, let's say, Final Fantasy could have easily have beaten with very little challenge. However, the one thing that still kind of bothers me, even to this day, is the overall look of the game. For some reason, it just looks really off to me, like it's trying to be a mix of 2D and 3D and ends up just being some strange mutated hybrid. And mind you, this game did come out the same year as Super Mario 64 did, so it gives me the impression that had this game come out, say, at least a couple of years earlier, then perhaps it would have looked more like something like Final Fantasy VI or one of the earlier additions to the Final Fantasy series. And I think had the game looked like that, then it certainly would have worked a lot better. However, despite this, I still think it is a title that's at least worth checking out if you're curious, but still, it is the lowest on my list. Number 4 has to go to the classic Mario Bros. Arcade game. Now, this is the oldest game on my list, having been originally released back in 1983, 7 years before I was even born. So by the time I got a chance to play this as a kid in the arcade for the first time, it was well over 10 years old. However, I really did enjoy playing this at my local arcade. Now, visually, this game looks pretty simple, as the objective is simply to jump underneath the enemies and quickly hit them before they can recover. But just like the classic Donkey Kong game, As you progress through the levels, it becomes more and more difficult, and this brings up perhaps the greatest quality of retro gaming, and that is the fact that to actually progress through the games, you actually had to improve your skill level. Video games today are designed to be beaten and not be too frustrating, while classic arcade games still required you to have to improve your hand-eye coordination, recognize patterns, and use proper timing. And it was made even better by the fact that you could actually play this with a second player and progress through the levels as a team. And I feel that playing with a friend right next to you will always eclipse any kind of experience you could have with playing with people online. Number 3 on my list is Super Mario Land on the Game Boy, which is without question one of the most important video games I've ever played, because while something like Final Fantasy VII is the reason that I've become a story-driven gamer to this day, it was Super Mario Land that was literally the very first video game I ever played in my life, and I'm actually happy that I can still remember that. Now, in design, Super Mario Land plays out exactly like a classic Mario game. There are 4 worlds that you have to travel through with classic and familiar enemies that you'll have to fight your way through, and I must admit that I actually do prefer the level design of this game over the classic games. However, unique to Super Mario Land is the addition that you can actually pilot 2 different types of vehicles, such as using a mini-sub during an underwater level, and even taking a plane to the skies and doing some 8-big dog fighting. And in addition, I actually do prefer the opening world's theme song over the classic Mario theme that most of us have come to know. And if you don't mind me saying, I really suggest you look it up if you haven't heard it before. Now, because of its importance, to me, this to this day remains my favorite classic Game Boy game of all time, more so than even any of the original Pokemon games, and it's for these reasons that I hold as the number 3 spot on this list. Number 2 on my list goes to Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. Now, if to me, Super Mario Land was an improvement over the classic Super Mario Bros. Games, then Super Mario World took everything Super Mario Land did to the next level, bringing Mario to the 16-bit. Absolutely every aspect one would expect has been improved upon and expanded upon. The visuals are better, the music quality is better, and it even has a higher collection of music tracks. There are even more worlds to travel, and one of the best additions was the ability to actually allow you to choose the levels you wanted to visit, granting the game a feeling of true adventure that wasn't really present in any of the previous Mario games up to this point. There are more power-ups used in the game, and the challenge factor has been cranked up to a 20, making this game by far the hardest Mario game I've ever played, and being only my second favorite Super Nintendo game behind Final Fantasy VI. To me, Super Mario World is the best Mario game using the traditional classic side-scrolling style, and it is something that I highly recommend you go out of your way to play. Number 1, and my favorite Mario video game of all time, just so happens to be the very last Mario game that I ever truly enjoyed as a kid. And it not only remains as being within my top 10 greatest games of all time, but it still holds the title of being the greatest N64 game ever made. And that just so happens to be Super Mario 64. This game successfully managed to bring Mario into 3D and thereby creating a unique experience that we had never experienced before. And it's crazy to think that this just so happened to be a release title, giving us the first taste of what we could expect from that generation of gaming. Everything about this game still holds up, to the level variety, to the soundtrack, to even the boss fights. And even though compared to today's graphics this game may look outdated, this is the one game that I would absolutely consider coming back to Nintendo for if they ever decide to re-release this game with updated graphics. This is the one game that, even for me being an exclusive Sony gamer for so long, is the little piece of my past that has always been able to bring me back and remind me why Nintendo used to be so great. And that is why it will always remain as my all-time favorite Mario game of all time. And that is my list of my top 5 favorite Mario games of all time. Now that you guys have seen my list, I would like to know what are your thoughts on my list, but more importantly, I would love to know your list of your favorite Mario games. And heck, if you happen to actually like some of the modern Mario games or games that came out after Mario 64, you can be sure to share them in the list in the comments down below just fine. Now, Like always, if you like this video, don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe, and also be sure to press one of the links in the description down below so you can either follow me on Twitter or watch me on Instagram, or heck, you can even support me on Patreon if you'd like to support another awesome top list idea or just video game topic list idea in general. So with that out of the way, I'd like to thank all of you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.